Morning!
Madnin!
Welcome to the India Explained podcast, recorded in London and San Francisco. One take, unscripted, no rehearsal.
Hey Bunty, welcome back. So I thought, you were talking about cars and stuff like earlier, so I thought we'd do a car theme story as you mentioned. And this is something we shared earlier in the week. So this was featured March 7th, so about 4 or 5 days ago, by Adityanath Jha, Hindustan Times Patna. The title of the story is Good and Faster Roads in Bihar to Blame for Rise in Accidents. Poland, Deputy CM Sushil Modi. So basically, this guy is saying that because roads have improved, that's why accidents have improved. Because people are driving at higher speeds. Mr. Modi said in Purnia, which is 360 kilometers northeast of state capital Patna. And he was talking to reporters after he had visited house of a woman, a poor thing, who was among 5 people who were killed in an accident. So I don't know, like, what do you make of this? I mean, is there some grain of truth in this? That bad roads are responsible for fewer deaths? Or is this an abdication of responsibility for creating a culture of traffic safety? What is the responsibility of the state here in monitoring these, buses that it was apparently a bus that killed these 5 people? Let me just leave it open-ended and see what your thoughts are about that.
Well, I think I'm really torn about this, Rohit, because on the one hand, I think if you were a society without cars, there would be no car accidents, right?
Right.
So there's a certain truism it has a certain ring to it, that if there is no knives, there will be no knife crime. If there is no guns, there will be no gun crime, right? So from a meta-philosophical point, if the Minister Saab is saying that if roads are getting better, therefore people are driving faster, and because people are driving faster, there's a chance for accidents. There is a certain comic value in this, where you're kind of attributing the cause and effect relationship. I'm slightly confused about, but this is. I don't want to kind of belittle the good people of Bihar, but this sounds like Bihari logic. That if you have better roads, you will have more accidents. Somehow but the question is, somebody should have said in that press conference, but why? Why does a better road mean that you will be driving irresponsibly? That question didn't happen, but I think, you've traveled in state roads and I have traveled interstate roads in India. You sometimes feel that, it's like taking a gamble, taking a risk. Because the road etiquette is basically driven by size of vehicle as opposed to law of the land. So he's onto something. That's my initial comment on it anyway, that, it's an odd logic, but, I'm part sympathetic with it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know sort of where to go with this. Because maybe it's also partially true that, once we get something that functions well, we, instead of using it in a responsible and a sensible way, we kind of tend to go overboard. I'm cautious in making this kind of generalization because I know that there is a kind of latent class dimension to it. I've heard many of these arguments that, like these uneducated, quote unquote, people don't know how to drive, etc., etc. So I'm aware of all those aspects. But the analogy I think of is, I think we had done a story on this a few months ago about how there was India's first luxury local train or luxury.
Correct.
Remember that, it had wonderful seats. I think there were either headphones or there was some kind of monitor. And it did one trip. And on the first trip, people tried to yank out the visual monitors. Some of them were smashed. There were pan stains. The seats were ripped up. So, I just, wonder if, yes, those earlier broken roads came with a lot of costs. And here you have, for the first time in Bihar, smooth roads and people just, kind of went berserk on them. These bus drivers now, again with due acknowledgement of the fact that I may be guilty of class bias here. I've seen, too many of these really terrible bus drivers in Delhi. Many years ago when I was in Delhi and I worked and took the bus, there used to be something called the White Line. And
Uh-huh.
white line or red line and blue line. I think the red line buses were notorious for basically just killing, large numbers of people. They would just speed at massive rates. I've done the Bombay-Pune highway many, many times, which has become wonderful, by the way. But, every time you go there, you do see some crashes. Although I will say that, the etiquette of driving there is a lot better than in the North Indian context. And again, at the risk of some generalizing, I wonder if there is again a certain kind of, there is this North Indian bravado, which is a case of, like throw caution to the winds and everything, just this notion of invincibility. And I would see it in another context when I lived in Goa, and I've lived in many places in all the years I spent in India. I remember that my family was in Goa and I was in boarding school in Delhi. I would go back during vacations or 2 or 3 times a year. Every time in the summer or even in the swimming season or the monsoon season, there would be these deaths of tourists from North India because those guys had no idea about the currents. Many of them could barely swim. They would just see the water. Guys from UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh jump in and they'd be swept away and, die a tragic death.
Look, I was just thinking back to what you were saying. We did an episode, it was our episode 19. We entitled it Paisa Vasool. And that was about the train being trashed on its first run. And it's very interesting. About 35 episodes down the line, we've pulled up another incident. There are parallels to it, which is a minister who holds high office in the state of Bihar, implying that accidents are caused by good condition of roads. So if roads were bad, the accident levels would be lower. And funnily enough, because we are torn because of two things, and I'm picking this up between us, is on the one hand, we are saying if we make progress in infrastructure, in making that progress, along with it comes a certain accompanying set of responsibilities and obligations. Right? And what this minister is highlighting, Mr. Modi, is that where those things haven't happened in unison. So there's been infrastructure spend of 17,000 crores, which is a sizable amount of money in improving roads, but probably there hasn't been safe driving or, policing or traffic measures that would have been put in place to ensure that just because there is a road which you can speed along on doesn't mean you speed along recklessly. But I think the broader point here is that as India progresses as a country and as we get more public facilities, whether it's the train, whether it's the road, whether it's better airports, there comes a certain set of civic responsibility in terms of how we behave and how we use it. And there's a woeful gap between the infrastructure and the behaviors around that infrastructure. Maybe this is one thing that we are picking up on this story.
Right. And, if I put my academic hat on, that this actually raises a number of complicated questions. That if you look at kind of the history of quote unquote civilization, the process by which people are made civilized, whether it's in Europe or in other societies, colonial societies where, there was a project of civilizing the natives, is a violent process. There's no two ways about it, right? These projects of, for instance, imposing public health, they were often done by coercive means. People were historically given vaccines by coercive means. People were, quarantined because of the plague and so on, and the state takes on these powers, right? So there is this sort of question of, can the state really engage in a kind of legitimate violence for a civilizing mission? And in the case of a post-colonial country like India, that becomes doubly complicated because really the agent of modernity was the colonial state. Anyway, before I get too pedantic, where am I going with this? I tangentially thought of a quote by Lee Kuan Yew, former premier of Singapore. And I know that, Singapore is a dictatorship in many ways. It's not a democracy, let's put it that way. That Indian middle classes often have fetishized it as a kind of model for India to follow, which makes no sense given scope and scale differences. And this is a troubling statement, but to be non-PC, he made a remark where he said that, I think there was a very heavy fine for spitting on the streets. And the idea was that, you can't build a first world country with third world habits. So, this, I mean, I'm putting it very, very bluntly and somewhat controversially, but I really think you need to have, some kind of sort of massive punitive measures. And these things do work. Like in Bombay, the police, the traffic police are still fairly corrupt. The last couple of times I was there, I experienced it. I was in a car and in a cab once, and both of them were extorted by some cop for $100 for nominally not being in the line or switching lanes or something. But on the other hand, Mumbai police has cracked down on drunk driving, and the incidences of deaths have also fallen. So I think there's probably that's the way to go.
One quick thing to end this one, Rohit. The guy who caused the accident, right? Do you think in court he will use the conditions of roads as his defense? Do you think he will be in a position to say in a court of law that Your Honor, because the roads were good and of a much better quality than what I was used to, I'm going to offer that as a defense?
It's a very, very interesting thought. In the US, that kind of stuff has happened. I think, I may be showing my ignorance here, I think that's called tort law. There have been, some very interesting cases. Like there was a woman who sued McDonald's because she spilled coffee on herself, and she sued McDonald's because the coffee was too hot. Like, coffee's supposed to be hot, but her claim was it was unreasonably hot. She won. There was a burglar who was about to burgle a house. He fell through a skylight and injured himself. He actually sued the owners of the house, and he won because his point was that I think apparently the skylight didn't follow some conventions, some legal conventions, some building codes or whatever. But I don't know if India has that law. So I have a feeling that they might try it, but I doubt it'll fly, in my view.
Chalo, we keep people posted on story. We just thought it was an oddball comment, but we discussed different angles to it, and I think on that note, and for driving safely wherever you are in the world, whether on good roads or bad roads, I think that's a good place to kind of end this particular episode.
Absolutely. All right. Take care, man.
Oh, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to us. Rohit and Bunty would like to sign off. Please stay tuned. Follow us on India Explained on Twitter. Keep listening. Thank you for all your support.